Hello, I'm Dr. Craig Bax. I'm the Chief Medical Officer, founder of the Cure Center for Chronic Disease, and CEO of Cure Coach Incorporated. Um, at the outset, I'd like to encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel at CBaxMD and to follow me on Twitter. My handle there is x.com/at CBaxMD, where we'll be providing regular ongoing updates to what's going on at the Cure Center and Cure Coach. Today, considering that we're in the middle of December, we're going into the winter months, heading into the holiday season, which is the cold and flu season. But I would actually suggest you might want to consider that this is the low vitamin D season. For most of us who don't live too near the equator, we don't get enough sunlight to keep us from becoming vitamin D deficient. So why does that matter? Well, it turns out that vitamin D isn't just a vitamin, it's actually more of a hormone, and it's active in a whole host of critical biological processes within our body. But I want to focus on two, maybe three areas. Um, First of all, before I go into that, vitamin D deficiency is defined by a vitamin D level less than 30. But this actually is not valid. It's a recognition that in the population, our overall population vitamin D level is low, and that's simply saying that that's the that's the level of vitamin D that falls below the two standard deviations from the mean. So if your entire population is deficient in vitamin D, your cutoff for being quote unquote low is going to be too low. Actually, an optimal vitamin D level is greater than 50. And so I generally shoot for a vitamin D level of 60 to 90. As a way of this enables us to get a margin for error in case intake lapses. In reality, the most practical way to get vitamin D levels up in the non-tropical parts of the hemispheres is to take a vitamin D3 supplement. Now, some prefer vitamin D3 drops because of their potentially enhanced absorption. Generally, I recommend capsules taken with food, preferably with fatty food. It is a fat-soluble vitamin. One of the things you need to know if you're overweight, if you have more body fat, you're going to require more vitamin D3 because you have larger volume of distribution. So just keep that in mind. It's fairly safe to say that most people can tolerate a vitamin D intake of 5,000 international units, which is 125 micrograms or more per day. It's highly unusual to become toxic on that. And frankly, toxicity is not generally seen unless the vitamin D is well above 100, more in the range of 150. And there is ample evidence that there are benefits to higher levels of vitamin D above 100, particularly if you're worried about cancer risk. So, what does vitamin D do? I'm not going to go into an exhaustive discussion about the literature and the biochemistry of vitamin D3, but I will just point out that vitamin D3, when low, is associated with immune dysfunction, both inadequate immune response to infections and to autoimmunity under proper conditions. One of the things that was widely known for those that were paying attention to it early on in the COVID pandemic, that a very, very strong indicator of bad outcomes with COVID, death, long COVID, occurred in individuals with vitamin D deficiency. By contrast, it was extremely rare for somebody with a vitamin D level in excess of 50 micrograms per deciliter to die from COVID. That alone should have prompted a public health message that said, go to your drugstore and get yourself a bottle of vitamin D3 and start taking it. Or if our powers that be wanted to be truly proactive, it would have been far less costly to have Amazon ship a 90-day supply of vitamin D3 to every man, woman, and child. It would have been far less expensive than and far less risky than in the process that was ultimately chosen. I'll let you decide why that didn't happen. Nevertheless, so vitamin D is very critical for our immune function. In fact, I mentioned the vitamin cold and flu season might actually be the vitamin D deficiency season, as we know that less exposure to sunlight lowers our vitamin D level. That happens during the winter months. So it's really important to know your vitamin D level, especially this time of year, and to correct it, to try to get it at least above 50 and preferably 60 to 90 so that you have some margin for error. The other role that vitamin D plays is in insulin and glucose metabolism. Low levels of vitamin D are associated with insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is actually a feature of our software that enabled our ancestors to thrive in the hunter-gatherer environment, which was how human beings lived until the agriculture age. But our genes have not changed significantly. So we do better in an environment where we are alternating feasting with fasting. And that enables us to survive in that environment. Therefore, that insulin resistance is actually a feature that enables that type of survival and thriving. It does not, however, support thriving in a grazing environment. Guess what our culture has us doing? 3 meals a day, snacks. Never allow yourself to be hungry. Always satisfy your cravings. That is, for that situation, insulin resistance is a bug. Now, having an adequate vitamin D level won't overcome a diet that's rich in sugar and starch and processed foods, but a low vitamin D level will add to that insulin resistance. And so if you've been told that you're insulin resistant, if you're at risk, at least take 5,000 units a day of vitamin D3 and have your vitamin D level checked at least once a year to make sure that you're getting enough. One of the things that is worthwhile mentioning is that the role of vitamin K2. I generally recommend a combination vitamin D3 and vitamin K2 supplement. I tend to see more consistently good levels of vitamin D3 with that combination. K2 enhances absorption of vitamin D3 in the gut. It improves the binding of vitamin D3 in the tissues where it does the most good, in the bones and other receptors. There's some evidence that it decreases calcification in arteries. That's a little bit controversial, the idea that if you have high calcium levels in your arteries, that it will extract calcium. I don't think that's actually true. I just think it plays a role in decreasing the things that drive atherosclerosis, inflammation that ends up with calcification. But that's a conversation for another day. The other key thing that vitamin K2 does is, here's that insulin resistance thing again, improves insulin resistance. So you're killing many birds with one stone. It's readily available. You don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money on a vitamin K2 D3 supplement, but if you are a patient in our practice, I generally recommend a high quality supplement available through an online ordering program called FullScript. So if you want to review this information further, I recommend you go to thecurecenter.life/curefacts, FAQs, /vitamin-D-deficiency. It's all written out here for you in more detail. But I'm glad that you took the time to listen to my brief introduction. Again, follow us on Twitter, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and have a safe and high vitamin D, low infection season, especially during the holidays. I wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you.